everyone. Hi everybody, Mr. Higgins here, and welcome to Project 5 Digital Art with Layers. On the screen are some examples of the amazing things that people made last year. Digital art can be a little intimidating at the start, but don't worry about that. I'm just going to go over the basics on how to use some drawing tools and how to color using layers. And for this, we are going to be using Sketch.io, which we used a little bit in the first project to generate text. I really like the drawing tools there. And then I'm going to be using Photopea again to do our coloring with layers. I'll just quickly go over what we're going to be doing in this project. In part 1, which is in Sketch.io, we're going to draw 3 images, and they're going to be 400 by 400 pixels. I want to make sure we have a transparent background, and I only want you to use 2 of the brushes. Only use the streamer brush or the line tool, and only black lines for now. Later we can get into color lines, but please for this project just using black lines. For part 2, we're going to jump into Photopea, and we're going to bring in the 3 black line drawings that you made in part 1, and once we're in Photopea, we're going to make 2 folders. I'm going to show you how to add folders to your layers, and then we're going to add 5 empty new layers to your color folder, and then you're going to use the brush tool to add color underneath your black line drawing. And that's one of the amazing things about digital art is you can change the color anytime you want if you've saved it as a Photoshop file. Part 3, all we're going to be doing is putting all your artwork together. You should have made 3 things, and we're going to make what's called a triptych. It's going to be 1200 by 400, although if you wanted to add more pieces of digital art, you could change the size. I had a few students who'd made 4 pieces of digital art and made theirs 800 by 800 instead last year. The project itself is pretty open, but I basically just want you to be able to show off all the things you've made on one PNG at the end that I can print out. And that's pretty much all we're doing for this project, so I'm going to jump over to Sketchpad and show you how to draw. Alright, when we get over to Sketch.io, I want you to be very careful that you search Sketch.io, go to Sketch.io, and then click on English, because that's going to make sure that we are all in the same version of Sketchpad, which is the 2019 version. Some people were following a link and clicking it and getting the 2018 version, which should look a little different. Anyway, to start things off, we're only going to be using 3 of the buttons on the left here, and then we're going to use some of the options on the right. And we're going to go down here and click New. Under New, we want to set our size to 400 by 400 and click Transparent and Create. Now at this point, you should get something like this. My screen's a little bigger than your screen will probably be. On the top right, you can click, and that's going to be your zoom. So left click the zoom, and down at the bottom you can zoom to fit and then zoom out slightly. The reason why you want to zoom in is so you can do a lot of detailed work, and that can be difficult at times. If you're super zoomed out doing detail work when it's that far away, it's not going to work too well. When you've got your streamer brush selected, we are ready to get started. So I'm going to click on my streamer brush, and now I am ready to do some drawing. Now you could search out a YouTube tutorial like a how to draw Jake the dog or something like that. And if you don't want to do something more complicated, you can also just really start with some basic shapes. So I'm just going to start with a triangle. All right, so if you accidentally click out and the brush starts to glitch out, it's going to be an easy fix. You just click reload. And because Sketch.io saves, it'll just reload, maybe step you back a few different steps before the glitch happened. All right, so I'm feeling pretty good about my weird Illuminati eye. Just wanted to show you some of the really neat things that Sketch.io can do, and it makes it a little different than most other drawing programs. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I actually wanted to maybe add some lines, something like sun rays behind the eye. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the select tool, because something that's just super neat is that if you notice all these things being selected, Sketch.io actually keeps every single line you make, and it lets you go back in and select, left click it with the select tool, and I tap to the right, I can actually move that circle. So each one of your lines is preserved as its own separate thing. If I don't like this line, I can click it and just delete it. I can Control Z, and that will step me back through my history. There's also the undo and redo buttons here on the right. At the very top, there's also layers, and you can see every single line you made is added as a layer, just like Photopea has all your PNGs and images in as a layer in your YouTube banner or in the Photoshop images. And this just lets you go back and really control any aspect of your drawing. So there's a lot of control when you get good at it, although it's a little tricky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Illuminati eye, I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, and then I'm going to do a little more art. Check back soon. This is looking pretty good. I do notice that this one's a little bit longer, but like I was saying before, right, I can just select that, I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, and then I'm going to tap that over so it's more in line with the other ones. I am going to then save it. I'm going to click export, and I'm going to save it as a PNG because that'll give it transparency and let us color it in part 2 in Photopea. Remember, you should be saving all your files in the same folder, Computer Science Studio, and Project 5. Name it a Digital Line Drawing 1, 2, 3, or Digital Art 1, 2, 3, something like that. When you're finished with that, you're ready to start on your next one. So you can keep on going with the streamer tool and practice a little bit. Or if you wanted to, you can use the line tool. We click up here, and you go over to the line tool. You can set your line width. I'm just going to do 5. When you make your line tool, now it just creates a line. So I just made that line. Now if I go to the select tool and I reselect my object I just made, and I go back to the line tool, I can actually change the width of the line even after I've already drawn it, which can make some pretty cool shapes. If I Control Z, that'll set me back. Remember, if I hold down Shift, that'll keep it the same size. So I'm just going to take my square, and I'm going to have it selected. I'm going to do Control C to copy, Control V to paste, and now there's 2 of them. So I can move that down into the side. Now I can select both again, Control C, Control V, and I can start to make some pretty neat shapes with almost no effort at all. And when you're finished, it could be something as simple as this. And this will work great for digital coloring. So the same thing with your second one, I'm going to save. For your third image, you can just do whatever you want. Search up a YouTube video, how to draw, the line tool, and just click around, maybe make a basic shape. Also, if you want to redo a shape or image that someone did last year, totally cool as well. We should be good, and we should be ready to move into part 2, Photopea, coloring our digital art with layers. Okay, so what I'm going to do to get started is I'm going to click Open from Computer, and I'm going to go to my folder. Here, I'm going to open up my eyeball here that I just made. We had been using the Zoom tool, so with the Zoom tool, I can zoom in. I can also click Fit to Area or Pixel. Fit to Area will kind of like fill your screen. If you wanted to do some detail work, it's probably going to be important to zoom in. Notice you can also use your middle mouse button, and that'll move you up and down the screen, or you can click over to the Hand tool to move around the screen. The first thing that I wanted to make is that we are going to add 2 folders before we add any color. Down here on the bottom left, you're going to notice these icons here. Right here is the new folder icon. I'm going to click that once, and I'm going to change the name to Line. I'm going to take my background, which is my line layer, and I'm going to drag that into the line folder. Underneath it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click another folder, and I'm going to call that Color. And this is where we are going to do all our coloring. Then click with coloring selected. You can see it's selected because it's dark. I'm going to click this new layer button. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'm going to drag it underneath. If you accidentally put your coloring folder in your line folder, just Control Z, undo, make sure that you have your line layer on top and your coloring layer underneath. At that point, you can left click so you can see all your coloring layers that we're going to be using. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out. I need to decide what color I want for my eyeball. I want kind of like a teal green. So I think that looks pretty good for me. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick one of these layers. I'm going to pick the bottommost layer for the color that I want the most. So I'm going to go over to my brush tool here, and I'm going to click on the brush tool. Now I'm going to change the size to however big I want it. I want to make sure I'm set up to 100% hardness. Remember, 100% hardness is like we're coloring with a Sharpie, while if you set to 0% hardness, that's like coloring with spray paint. Both can work, but they do very different things. Coloring line art like this, it's really important that your hardness is set up to 100%. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to color, and I'm just going to color area here. I don't really care about the lines. By using the layers, the colors will go on top of each other. I want to be careful on the lines because I'd have to use my eraser tool to touch this up if I color outside the lines. And then what you can also make it smaller, and I can zoom in. And I'm going to go into hyper mode. So once I've got my first color picked, now I need to go into my second color. Before I do a second main color though, I want to show you on how to do shadows. If I click down here on my color, that's going to open up my color palette. With the color palette, as you click around, it'll change to whatever color you're clicking on, which is really useful for sampling colors. But for right now, I just want to make a shadow version of this color. How do I do it? There's a bunch of different numbers here, but the one that we want is going to be the B. So if you hover your mouse over that B and you drag it to the left, it's going to drag down your darkness, or it'll take up your brightness. And so what I want to do is I'm going to click that, and I'm just going to make it a little bit darker. So I'm just going to drag it to the left a little bit, maybe take it down about 10%. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to click up on the layer above this, so I'm no longer on my original layer, and I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to start to do some shadows. And now you'll notice, so I've just named this teal shadow. You can name it by double clicking on it. And now I can toggle that on and off using the eye. So no shadows, shadow. Now I'm not a great digital artist. I was mostly photography and video, but I like to doodle. And I think that this is a great way, by adding some highlights and some shadows, in addition to multiple colors, gives you just a ton of control. One of the really neat things you can also do is you can come up here to image and adjustments, and you can change your brightness and contrast. You can even change your hue and saturation. So if you go to hue and saturation and you change your hue, that'll completely change the color of the image. Now if I do that, so I'll do -100, okay, and I'll go back down to teal, do the same thing, image, hue and saturation, and I'll do -100. Just changes the color entirely. Okay, I'm going to go in super mode and go super fast and finish this drawing up, and then we'll get it to talk about part. This is looking good so far. I'm just going to keep on going. So I added another shadow layer. If I need to add more layers, I'm just going to click up this top layer, layer 5, and I'm just going to click add more layers. So I have a couple different ones. Always save these as PSDs as you're working, because if you accidentally just save as a PNG, it flattens it. You can't change your color. You can't turn your shadows on and off. So keep saving as a PSD and only save as a PNG at the end.
Ctrl H and D. H, Z.
As I go through and I toggle, notice I can toggle all these layers on and off. This was a pretty complicated one. You probably just need a couple different layers, try a couple different colors, try to experiment with some shadows. Saving is going to be pretty much just like everything else that we've done in Photopea so far. Go to File, Save as a PSD. That'll preserve your layers, which will let you go back, change all those colors later. Just call it Digital Art 1, and then after you save as a PSD, then export as a PNG. So we want to make sure it's high quality up to 100%, 400 by 400. Save image as, and you can just name it whatever you want. Just make sure you don't save it the same name as the black line drawing, because we want to have the black line drawing version. That's the PNG, no color. The color version now, and then the Photoshop file with all of your layers in the line and coloring folders. All right, we're going to go to part 3 and just put everything together, and then we'll be done with this project. We are moving on to part 3, where we are going to make our triptych, which means we're going to put all 3 of our pieces of artwork on one thing to show off easily. If we're in Photopea, we're going to go to New Project. Let's do 1200 by 400. Click OK, and now it should be like this. Now we could leave it as a white background. I'm going to open and place my 3 PNGs I made. Now I've got my 3 shapes on my banner. It's looking pretty good. I can leave it white if I want to. I could also select all 3 of these guys and add a drop shot on my own. But also what I could do is add a completely different background if I wanted to. Just remember, you go to Tools, Size, Large, so make sure you have high quality images. If it's more than 1,000, you'll be good to go. Right click, Save Image As. Drag and drop it into Photopea. I can hold down Shift to make it real big and not distort. And then all I can do is I can take it and I'm just going to drag it underneath my 3 images. Bank, I've got it. So there's no reason to save this as a PSD since it's pretty simple. We're just dropping a couple things on there. And I can go to File, Export as a PNG. I'm going to click Save, Project 5, Final, or Digital Art Final. Save that, and that's what you're going to turn in Google Classroom and put on your portfolio. Of course, if you wanted to add more, you can, and it takes a lot of practice to get good at this stuff. So I am super excited to see what y'all make, and have a great one. Peace!